We're talking today about mental health and how diabetes impacts our mental health. And we have three phenomenal women here to share their experiences living with type 1, working with people who live with type 1. So I'm just going to introduce them now to you, and then we're going to have a panel discussion. So first up, we have Kristin Rivard. Kristin was a 2009 DHF scholarship recipient, and she's been an active volunteer with DHF since receiving her scholarship. She graduated from Toronto Metropolitan University in 2015 with a BA in Child and Youth Care, and went on to work with the York Region District School Board as a child and youth care worker, working with students with special needs. Kristin has lived with diabetes for 22 years after having had 95% of her pancreas removed at the age of 3. She also has mental health conditions as a result of her diabetes from her life and from her career. Kristin's hobbies and interests include anything and everything Disney, puzzles and games, sports and fitness, reading, creative arts, cooking, learning, and spending time with her family and friends, including her husband Jonathan and her 3-year-old fur baby, her cat Oscar Max. So welcome, Kristin. Thank you for being here. We also have Heather Choi. Heather was a 2011 DHF scholarship recipient, and she currently works in HR at Statistics Canada. Heather describes herself as having a bubbly personality with a quirky weirdness. Her hobby projects include perfecting her watercolor skills, raising her own fur baby and fish, and making the world's best brownies. So we'll have to get everyone together sometime so we can all try those. Heather loves exploring new places and trying new foods. And there's always something new to discover. DHF helped her connect with a community of support and fellow T1Ds to make her struggles seem more manageable. And Heather hopes to promote that same energy with everyone she meets. And last but definitely not least, we have Kirsten Davidson, who established, fundraised, and presented the DHF Kirsten Davidson Scholarship Fund from 2009 to 2015. So a big thank you for that, Kirsten. Kirsten now works as a registered psychotherapist and is certified by the College of Registered Psychotherapists of Ontario. Her formal education, training, and firsthand experience living with type 1 diabetes allows her to relate with others on their T1D journey. She feels honored to help individuals and their personal supports address the anxiety, frustration, insecurity, and other challenges that can accompany T1D. And outside of her role as a mental health professional, Kirsten enjoys reading, discovering new music, painting, trying out new restaurants, attending yoga classes, and spending time with family and friends. So we're just going to go through the questions. The first question is for everybody. If you could just share a little bit about how diabetes has impacted your own mental health or the mental health of the patients that you work with, Kirsten. So we'll start maybe with Kristin, if you're up for that.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Before I start, just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for having us here. It's really awesome to see you guys doing this from virtually far away. And also thank you to Heather for bringing me and my cohorts into this to share with you guys. So I would say for me, it's basically a balancing act. Like you have to have one in line with the other, because if the scale tips, then it's a stumbling block, really. As Heather mentioned, my diabetes was caused due to my pancreas being removed and hypoglycemia. And that in turn also caused a lot of my mental health. So anxiety, social reactive disorder, PTSD. And again, as Heather mentioned, that turned into my career, into later adulthood. And yeah, it's just a matter of, as I said before, trying to find that balance and keeping in mind, day to day, and Heather and Kirsten obviously know this, days are going to be rough, days are going to be hard, but we just got to keep going, keep pushing, and keep telling ourselves, nothing can stop us. We just got to find that balance.
Thanks, Kristin. Heather, did you want to add your own perspective and experiences?
For sure. So for me, I think I've always kind of been very type A, very much a perfectionist. So I likely already had underlying kind of mental health related issues, but diabetes kind of exacerbated a lot of those for me. So just the need to stay in control, having all of these rules and stipulations, and just trying to do everything right and still failing. I'm sure that's an experience that a lot of people have been through, where you can do everything that you've been told, you follow all of the rules and recommendations, and it's still just not working out for you, because every day with diabetes is a new adventure, it turns out. And so I think it's not a secret that the comorbidity between mental health issues issues and chronic health conditions is quite high. It is a lot to manage on top of like the regular stresses of growing up and becoming a person. You have this whole other piece to your life that other people may not have to deal with and just like may not understand. So I think it's really just addressing that fact and like reconciling it with myself is a big part of kind of accepting it and embracing it for me.
Thank you, Heather. Kirsten, did you want to add a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I completely relate to you there, Heather, on the whole perfectionist thing. That's kind of what I was going to talk about as well. Just feeling like when you see your blood sugar out of line, that it's your fault, it's your responsibility, and always wanting it to be perfect, and that's just not possible. I think that can be incredibly hard to separate. Okay, where is my own mental health with regards to anxiety and perfectionism and other aspects of my life, and then how is that trickling into my diabetes management? And it can feel very all-consuming when, like, I have a Dexcom. I'm very fortunate to have coverage for that. I know a lot of people don't, but it gets to a point where you feel like you're abusing it when you're checking it every 2 seconds. And I've slowly learned to kind of pull back on that and cut myself a bit of slack, but it's hard, right?
Could you, Kristen, just explain what a Dexcom is for those of us who aren't?
Absolutely. So I'm wearing a sweater right now. Otherwise, I would just like lift it up and show you guys. But it's a constant glucose monitor. So that's what a CGM stands for. And it syncs to an app on my phone. And it shows me. Oh, there we go. Heather's got one. And it shows you where your blood sugar is. Here, let me just open actually my app on my phone and I can just show you what it looks like. So I'll reveal my blood sugar to you guys right now. I'm 12 and I'm trending up. I just ate a sandwich before this, so there we go. But it shows you where your blood sugar's been throughout the day and what way you're trending. So it's been a huge help for me in a lot of ways, but also a bit of a hindrance when I'm constantly checking it. So having to put those limits on myself and not try and be such a perfectionist with it.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for sharing your blood sugar. I think for a lot of diabetics, your blood sugar is sort of the sacred thing that you don't want people to look at because there's a lot of judgment that comes if it's not in that golden range. So I appreciate both you and Kristen showing it out there so openly. That's awesome. The next question is we're going to start with Kristen about what diabetes burnout or diabetes distress is. So Kristen, did you want to start? Maybe you can give just a little overview of what it is and what it's like to kind of deal with.
I did actually experience diabetes burnout at least 3 times within the last few years. Just give you a little bit of a backstory. I do work in the education system, so you know how things have been going lately with that, and also working with kids with special needs. So that's struggle, and then with COVID, and working from home, and then not working, and then just going back in school. So it's been quite a adjustment. But basically, how I can explain it is, as we've been mentioning, your sugars get out of whack. But when they get out of whack, we're talking like really high numbers. So give an example. In that time, I was anywhere from 16 to 22. And, I was like, what's going on? What's happening? And obviously that would raise my mental health. Like, I'm panicking, I'm having anxiety attacks. It's like, I'd be coming home from work, trying to deal with it, trying to figure all this out, contacting my diabetes team, figuring out all this stuff. Luckily now I'm back in a balance. But yeah, it's a scary thing, because as Heather and Kirsten have mentioned, you're wondering, what did I do? What's going on? What's happening? What am I, is there something wrong? Do I need to change something? Do I need to fix something? Like, there's all these things are running through your mind. And that's where the mental health comes in, that it basically shuts your body down. And then again, as I mentioned before, finding that balance. Okay, so do I need to change rates on my insulin? Do I need to, use a CGM? Do I need to change diet? Do I need more exercise? It's just, finding that balance again to get out of that struggle.
It's hard because you're kind of constantly living with this physical numbers game that you're playing and then having to balance that with the rest of your life. And a lot of times I mean, I've had burnout myself, and you just kind of don't want to look at your blood sugars anymore for a while, and you don't want to think about it anymore, and you just kind of shut down. And it can be hard to kind of pull yourself out of that. Heather or Kirsten, did you want to share anything about burnout or distress that you've either experienced or seen with the patients that you work with?
So I'm going to jump in here. So I have been fortunate enough not to have experienced burnout. I think part of it is just like I've had a really strong support system that have kind of kept me in check when I was ready to tap out, which is really what it feels like. I've definitely gotten to that threshold where it's kind of like that Encanto song where it's like pressure, like a drip, drip, drip that'll never stop. Like diabetes isn't one of those conditions where at some point you can tap out and come back and fix it after that period. Like it just keeps going and it just keeps piling on. And while like people on the outside may think like, if you just did these two things, like it would fix it, like you give yourself some insulin and go for a walk. But if you're just like mentally and physically at your capacity, sometimes you don't have the energy or like the physical strength to be able to do those things. And I think that's kind of where like burnout comes in, where people are like, I just have no more to give. I don't have any more in the tank to be able to like do those things to take care of myself. But it is frustrating because in not doing those things, you then reach a stage where you feel even worse, and it just kind of keeps compounding, where like it's like catch-22, where if you did those things you might feel better, but like you need to feel better to do those things. And so it's like this horrible vicious cycle of I feel like garbage and I don't want to do anything, but I don't want to do anything because I feel like garbage. So I think that's where it is for me. I hope that most people will not experience it. And if they do, they have like excellent support systems here, like peers, family, friends who are there to support them, because that's really how I've managed to like go this long maybe without getting quite there for too long.
Yeah, for sure. Just to build on that, both Heather and Kristen, I agree with what you're saying, right? It's interesting to hear your experience with it, Kristen, and then Heather, what you feel that you've gone through as well. And I think it's important to acknowledge how there's burnout can just happen to anyone. And then there's that extra level, right, with being diabetic. So for me personally, I struggle with my blood sugars when I am burnt out from lifestyle things, right? So from job, friends, school, whatever it is, right? And then that affects the blood sugar. And I think that's a difficult thing for me because I want to be so in control of it. And we're not in control of how stressed we get sometimes. And stress releases hormones that contribute to our insulin going up, our blood sugars going up. And so that can be really frustrating for me because it's like, okay, I'm already stressed about X, Y, and Z, and now my blood sugar is reflecting that. So great, there's one more thing.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, for sharing so honestly. And just sort of the flip side of that, and we'll start with you, Heather, what tips do you have for people who are coping with a chronic illness like diabetes? Or what do you wish someone had told you when you were first diagnosed, or sort of in the first few years of figuring it all out?
Okay, yeah. So I think one of the biggest things, and we kind of touched on this with numbers, is but like numbers are very much data, not judgment. So like you should never feel bad about your numbers. They're purely there to inform you about what's going on with your body, but in no way, shape, or form do they reflect your worth or like how well you're doing with diabetes. They're just there to say like, hey, by the way, this is how we're doing. And like, then you use that as information to make informed decision as an educated like person. So I think it's one of those things where like people are very hard on themselves and they're like, oh, my blood sugar's out of range and I've been here for a while, but sometimes it's out of your control and it's just your body doing your body thing the way it thinks it should be done. And obviously it may not be working out perfectly, but they are not judging you in any way, shape, or form. And so don't feel bad about it. I think one of the other things is like, and to an extent, like I'm going to caveat this by saying it's not an always thing, but like diabetes has taken a lot from everybody. I think everybody who has diabetes, everybody who supports someone with diabetes, like it is a beast of a condition. And so sometimes if you need to use diabetes as your fall guy, like if you are late for work or school, and you're like, oh, I had a diabetes moment, like no one is asking you about that. If you really need to use the bathroom and you don't want to buy a $7 coffee at Starbucks, just say like, I have diabetes. And usually it's a very nice barista. They're like, yep, go ahead, like you do you. So I think like there are opportunities where it has taken so much from you. So like, why not just take a little bit back and be like, not an always thing, but like right now, I do not want to like get off the sofa and I know my blood sugar is trending down, so I should probably grab a juice, but I've definitely called to someone who's like on the other side of my home and been like, I can't move because I'm low. Please get me a snack. And was I able to get my snack? Absolutely. Would it have damaged my diabetes in any way, shape, or form? No. Did I still have someone walk across the entire apartment to get me a snack? Yes. So I think like it is that balancing act where like, yes, it has taken a lot from you. So sometimes like it's okay to take one back. And then I guess like the final piece is like you are showing up for yourself when you take care of yourself, but you're also kind of showing up for other people. So I'm sure everyone's parents in some way, shape, or form did hover a little bit. Maybe it was when you were first diagnosed, maybe it was when you were having a bad diabetes period, but they're showing up because they really care about you. It is okay though to set boundaries and be like, okay, like this is too much. I need you to step off and I need to take care of this myself because I'm sure everyone feels like garbage when their maybe blood sugars aren't cooperating, when you're having a really frustrating time. And so like those boundaries can also help you just say like, I'm doing the best I can and you are not helping. And that's okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. Kristin or Kirsten, did you want to add anything to that piece?
Yeah, I'll just jump in. I love what you said there, Heather, about like taking back from diabetes and normalizing that, right? Because why not? When you can and it's not harming others, it's not the worst thing in the world to be doing, given what we're going through every day, right? So I want to say I love that.
I'll mention it in 3 things. So number 1, being mindful, because as Heather said, it's numbers. One day you're going to be low, one day you're going to be normal, one day you're going to be high. And it's just how you go about, as I said again, balancing it all out. Second thing, Heather mentioned it, support systems. Like the best way for us to thrive is having those supports. So not just our diabetes teams at our hospitals, but you know, we also have the DHF community, our families, our friends, our significant others. I know he could hear me in the background, but I'm going to throw my husband out there as one of those people because he literally, when I tell people this story, they're shocked. He literally, when he started dating me, took all my medical books, basically read them front to back, and could read every symptom like this within a couple months, which is remarkable for anybody. And then as one of our favorite DHF famous celebrities, Nick Jonas, who wrote a song, you know, nothing can stop us. If we keep our minds focused on that, we can do anything basically a normal person can do. We just have, you know, some limitations, yes, but we can still accomplish anything we put our minds to.
Thank you. I feel silly talking after you guys because you said it all so well and so succinctly. But Kristin, what you said kind of ties into our final question, and then we'll open up to questions from our audience, I guess. And Kristin, I'll get you to start with this. That idea of support is so key for mental health and for managing our diabetes. So what would you suggest? How would you tell friends and families? Because we have a lot of people in the room today who are supporters of those living with diabetes. What would you tell them? How would you suggest they support the people in their lives who do have diabetes?
For sure. So before I kind of answer that directly, I did, have something a little bit on the bias that we sometimes get from family and friends. And for me lately, just as an adult compared to when I was younger, I hear a lot of, you're doing so well. Oh, she's got it. She's managing it so well. And while that can feel validating, it can also feel very invalidating because it is hard. And sometimes you feel like maybe I'm not, like, today really wasn't a good day. I didn't really manage it very well because of XYZ or that type of thing. I was talking about this with Heather Miller yesterday, and she had a good analogy that it kind of feels like a math test that you study for, but then they change the questions, and you never know like what the right answer is. So it's constantly a guessing game. But anyway, bringing it back, I think that something that I recently went through with my family that I wanted to share is asking them, reintroducing them kind of to being involved, because when I went from the pediatric care, into adulthood, they went from very, very involved to, not that they have forgot that I'm diabetic, but it's not something that's talked about a lot because there's this misconception that Kirsten's got it all figured out. So I've actually sat them down and kind of asked them to be more involved, just so that when I'm with them and I'm eating, I can say, like, stop talking to me for a second because I need to give myself insulin. Here's how much I'm going to give myself. Do we think that sounds good? Going back to basics, because on some levels, I have this fear of going low, especially in public. So trying to hold myself accountable to how much insulin I'm giving. And because when I don't, I tend to reduce it by such an amount that I always go high after eating out. So trying to combat that and basically asking them to be more involved, which is kind of counterintuitive because I know that a lot of parents probably feel like they're maybe hovering or being helicopter parents, but when your kid goes off and sets those boundaries like I did, I asked for that. I said, like, stop asking me because I couldn't stand it anymore. Then I ended up feeling really alone. So I think, to answer your question, Heather, the best thing that parents and any family or friends can do is to be curious about the diabetics' desire of involvement they'd like. Because maybe they want less and maybe they want more.
I love that piece about sort of asking the person, because we all have different needs, right? And some of us want to do it completely on our own, and others want our partners giving us the shot once in a while. So I think it's so key to ask the people in your life about what it is that they need and what they're looking for support. Kristin or Heather, did you want to add to that about just what you would say to those who are supporting people living with diabetes? Or you could talk about some of the bias you've encountered as well, or the questions that just like grate on you when you get asked over and over again if you can have the piece of cake or whatever it is.
Okay, I'm going to agree with Kirsten here because that's like, we've got it all figured out, what we're doing. But on the reverse order, I literally left my parents' house 4 years ago now. So it was, my parents were constantly on me. Now that I've been away, and if anything happens and I tell my mom, she's like, you're supposed to know this. And then when I say to her, oh, but I have support here helping me, she goes, it's not his job to do it. It's your job to do it, not his. And I'm like, but there's somebody here, as you said, about being in public, having somebody there just to know what you're doing. So I'll show you this on the Dexcom. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this before, but on our Dexcoms here, we have something called a share link. So I am at one school and my husband is at another. We're 5 minutes apart, yet as soon as my alarm goes off that I'm low, that I'm high, that something's off, he will get that same alarm and he will message me or call me and say, are you on top of this? Is everything okay? And I'll let him know. And recently I had an emergency at work and he came and got me because he got that same message, and it was like, I need to be here because there's something wrong, obviously. And I was able to now develop a emergency plan at work with my school. So I carry a walkie on my belt. If my alarm goes off, I'm supposed to walkie the office and say, I'm low, here's my location. Somebody will come look out for me. Or if I see my admin in the hallway, I have an Apple Watch on. She'll say, what's your sugar? Show it to her on my arm and then go about my day to day. But what I would say is be mindful, because again, as we mentioned, one day we could be this way, one day we could be that way. Stress could be overwhelming. We're sick and our blood sugars are bouncing all over the place. And then having an emergency plan with the people that you support. So being like, hey, you could call me if there's something wrong, or being the first responder on their, list of emergency contacts, just so, you can be there to support when they're not able to. That's huge for any one of us, really. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm just going to parrot a little bit what they said, but I think like asking how you can show up for someone is such a big part of that conversation. Like whether it's in a very big way, whether it's small things, whether it's like Kirsten said, like setting up an emergency plan or like telling people that you need them to be there for you more. I think just like that check-in piece where like you're asking how they would be best supported. That way you are not crossing those boundaries, you aren't hovering, you're not being like a helicopter parent or support friend, because sometimes that's not the support people need. Sometimes they just need like maybe you to carry candies in your pocket because they've run out of their low snacks. And so I think that's things like that are really nice. One of my biggest like pet peeves is also like a bias that a lot of people have, but when they say like, are you sure you can eat that? Or you can't eat that. So I usually get super sassy when people say this to me because like I know my body best and like most diabetics do too. So everybody's diabetes is different. And while we are not like healthcare professionals or like registered dietitians or nurses, like you often do know your body best. So even though the carb count on the package may say this has 60 grams of carbs, you're like, if I give myself 60 grams of carbs worth of insulin, I will definitely be low in 1 hour. So like listen to your body and learn, because you are probably more knowledgeable than the packaging on some kind of food. But also like if someone does ever tell you like, you can't eat that, just like clap back instantly. Like it can be an educational moment, but it's also just like the only things I can't eat are rock, glass, and people. And the last one is morally related, not health. So it is just like one of those moments where I think it's a bias that a lot of the world still holds, where like they think they need to police and they should be allowed to police diabetic eating habits, but like A, that's never okay, and B, like take the second to maybe educate someone and be like, type 1 diabetes, regardless of what I eat, will still be type 1 diabetes. I will still have to take insulin. My pancreas will still not have the islet cells it needs to produce insulin, so I'm just gonna do me.
And I will just jump on one more thing there that you just reminded me of. Educate, what you guys are doing. I'm able to do right now. This whole month at school with my students from kindergarten to grade 8, I've been teaching them everything ins and outs of diabetes, because we also have a student in our school who has diabetes. So getting them to know how they can help in their school, but also in their community, that's huge. Basically from youngest to oldest, any way you guys can do that, which you guys are obviously doing, is huge help for us too.
I think, yeah, the education piece is so key, because thinking back, like I was diagnosed 22 years ago, and just what was recommended then is so different from what's recommended now. Like with all medical, there's so much change and research and learning that happens. So it's really important to kind of be open to learning that yourself, and don't expect us to educate you as well. Like if you know somebody who's living with diabetes, you can look that up yourself as well. I was wondering, just before we get into the questions in the chat, a couple of you have mentioned sort of anxiety about going low. If you could just explain what that is for people who don't know the blood sugar ranges and what happens when you go low versus high, because low is something that can be very scary for a lot of people living with diabetes and the people around them.
So being hypoglycemic, I feel like I should start with this one, because there's also something else that we can teach you guys about being low. So you don't want to be low, because when you go low, you basically change personally. Like you get dizzy. We usually, I hate using the term, but we do. Sometimes we act like we're drunk, even though we're not drunk. And just a whole bunch of different things that are out of body happen. And also somebody like me, because of my previous health conditions, I'm not able to read my lows. So I have something called, and a lot of diabetics now have something called hypoglycemia unawareness, which means we could basically be 2 and carry on a normal conversation with you, but you need to know our symptoms, and you need to know somebody that can like track it, because we won't know until it's like the lowest point. So that's where I say, like my husband a couple weeks ago or a month and a half ago now, when he came to see me, he told my admin, you can see she's got the glossy eyes, her face is all flushed, she's, starting to stutter, so that's one example I can give.
Yeah, that thanks for sharing, Kristen. I just to jump off of that, I am very sensitive to when I feel low. And it's a bad feeling, and it's scary because, as like just for the education piece, yes, symptoms when you're low tend to be shaking, sweating, maybe like for me, my heart tends to race, but again, that also is worsened by the anxiety because you could get to a point where you're rendered unconscious. And I've never experienced that, but I think that's because of the anxiety about it. So when I go out to eat, I tend to have this fear of that happening for many reasons. Like obviously it's a life-threatening illness, but also you could lose your license. Like there's so many different negative outcomes from that happening, from requiring medical assistance beyond yourself. And I have kind of put into my own mind, oh, I'll err on the side of caution, and I'd rather be on the higher side than be low. But I'm sick of living that way because I'm sick of being high every time I go out to eat. So that's what what I kind of alluded to at the start when I was sharing, is working on that and holding myself accountable. If something is 50 carbs, I need to bolus that it's 50 carbs. I need to give myself the insulin for 50 carbohydrates, not cut it in half or even a third because I'm scared to go low, because that's going to have long-term health implications. So that's the fear for me, really, is that fear of fainting. And although it's never happened, it really impacts my lifestyle.
I do not have either low unawareness or like kind of this low phobia. So I'm kind of the opposite spectrum, where like I really like to keep my sugars between a 4 and an 8 more, let's say. 4 and 7 is a very tight range. But it is just like one of those things where if I'm high for like above 10 or 11 for longer than 3 hours, it's basically like a hangover without any of the fun part of having been drunk before. So like you feel like you're unwashed and unclean on the inside. You're very thirsty all the time. Food is both like appealing and disgusting at the same time. And so I kind of like avoid that at all costs, and maybe sometimes aggressively bolus. So I'm a big rage boluser. If my sugar has been too high for too long, or what I feel is too long, I will sometimes stack my boluses and then look at my pump and be like, oh dear, I've just given myself 10 units over like the last 30 minutes, which is not a good time. And the fallout from that is always bad. I did just want to address also like a comment that Chanel made in the comment section. And so I do not want to call out anyone who is showing up for the people that they're supporting in any way, shape, or form. A lot of times like check-ins and like checkups, like, can you eat that, are like well-intentioned and appreciated, because sometimes I'm like, I'm going to eat this whole bag of like Bulk Barn candy because I can just give myself 300 grams of carbs. And is that a good choice for like any human being? Probably not. So like, it's nice sometimes when people check me on bad habits like that, where I'm like, I'm free, I can do anything. So like, I don't want to say that like, that's not a good thing to do. I think it's just like checking in with those people to like not tell them you can't eat that, because that was my pet peeve when I was first diagnosed, when people would say you can't eat that. But also just like making sure that people are okay with you checking in that way, or if there are better ways that you could be checking up on them.
And we can all admit diabetics do have sweet tooth. Just putting it out there, we do. So we will binge every now and again on something. But yeah, just we have to find a way to keep that, control.
For sure. And again, just jumping off what you said there, Heather, that it is that whole asking, or them coming to you and saying like, I've noticed you've been eating this and I'm worried about you. Do you want me to like ask you or kind of hold you accountable, or do you feel like you've got this? Because I think that's the difference between whether it's going to strike a nerve or not. Because I know if my blood sugar is high, like a symptom of being high is irritability. And then if someone asks me what my blood sugar is, no, you don't want to answer that, right? Or they comment on what you're doing. You can be very hypersensitive and snappy. So again, just asking what level of involvement do they want? Because ultimately everyone as a supporter wants to be supportive, and sometimes the diabetic doesn't perceive it that way.
Amazing from everybody. Thank you. And thank you for addressing the comment in the chat, Heather. I was wondering if anyone else had other questions for our panelists, or anything you wanted to share about your own personal experience, or just kind of open it up. I see Tariq has your hand up. If you wanted to.
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to say thank you to the panelists, actually, first of all, because I think this goes to show how important the information is that we're talking about. I've been diabetic for almost 15 years now, and sometimes I get the feeling that I know everything about it, and certain things that we talked about, makes me realize like, oh, I actually never think about that, or I never, try and put myself in that situation. But so on that hand, it's very nice to hear. And my question is regarding frustration with diabetes. Sometimes whether it's a bad blood sugar or even the progression in like a cure for diabetes, like I remember 15 years ago hearing about different trials being made, and even today, like the same trials are going on, maybe no progress. So how do you deal with that frustration? How do you guys, are there any tips that you guys can offer, or just your insight on kind of how to deal with that aspect of diabetes?
So I've been dealing with this from really an early age, and I've been dealing with this before I was even diabetic, back in my hypoglycemia days, because I'll give you a little bit of a backstory, was that nobody else in my family has diabetes, and just out of the blue, one of my cells in my body, this is according to the doctors, and my medical records are actually in the U of T books, if I'm still sure they are, but one of my cells went rogue, and then they basically tested everyone in my family and basically said, no, nobody else, like history wise, whatever, have diabetes. And then they asked the question, what's the likelihood she's going to have children with diabetes? Again, highly unlikely. But, it's just that being mindful thing that, like, yes, there's a possible cure going to happen. This new advancement's probably going to help. This one's going to do this. This one's going to do that. It's just a matter of, finding what works for you and just keeping in mind, it's going to be okay.
I think it's a hard one, right? Because we're trying to live with a condition that we're also told we might not have one day. Something I've heard a lot from my endo and from other people in the field is like, oh, you will see a cure in your lifetime. And it's something I don't think about often, because I found that when I did, it put me in a position where I would think about just being reckless or ignoring it, kind of being in denial of it, pushing it to the side because, well, one day we'll be fine. So I wouldn't say to not have hope. We are the Diabetes Hope Foundation. So it's not to have hope. It's not to not have hope for that. It's exciting to think about. But I think something that has been really helpful for me and for clients that I've worked with is the acceptance piece. And, thinking of, if it happens, that's amazing. But kind of going through life, imagining that this is how we are and this is how we have to deal with it, because if we don't, we might treat our bodies recklessly, and that could have long-term effects.
Can I just jump in for a minute on this topic? Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, everybody. This is a really delicate issue, and thank you for bringing it up. Just recently, I was at a premiere. It's called The Human Trial. I don't know if anybody has heard it. Has anyone heard of The Human Trial? Yeah. No. Okay. Yes. So very interesting documentary. It was a 5-year study, and it was very disturbing. I brought my kids who have diabetes, and they said it was the most depressing thing they've ever seen. Just call me back when you find a cure. In the meantime, I'll try to stay healthy. So basically, when my kids were diagnosed 7 years ago, the first thing kids said, oh, there's a cure on its way. In 5 years, there's a cure. It's like this whole 5-year thing. It's like, oh, in the next 5 years, it's going to happen. And I think it's kind of hopeful to think that there is a cure happening, and there is. I really feel it's there. It's just hasn't been. There's so much protocol, but with all the biology and the islet transplants and so many things that's happened in the past. The scientists are really making tremendous progress. And if you want to know more information about that, I suggest you reach out to Dr. Michael Rydell, who's at York. He's also a scientist. And also There's other doctor. He was actually speaking, sorry for the background, he was speaking on the panel on the human trial. And I really think that if you want to know more information, he's on the tipping point. And I think you should reach out to him, and just say that Barbara Pasternak suggested I give you a call. What's going on with research? But he's very, very involved in the whole landscape of research right now. So, but be optimistic, because I really believe in my children's lifetime there will be a cure. I mean, you know what? If you look at all the amazing devices that's been created in the last 20 years and how life has become so much easier for you compared to when we were, my husband and I had to take care of the kids. The needles were humongous and my kids were on pig insulin, and that was like 25 years ago. And now look, the amazing insulins you have and the devices and the CGMs, it just makes it so much easier to deal with. So thank goodness your lives are a little easier now with just controlling it and knowing where you're at. As far as the cure goes, I am very optimistic. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara.
And I think I may just jump in. So my messaging is going to be a little bit different, I guess, just because, like, for me, I very much do not think about it all the time. But I know that when I was first diagnosed, it was something where, just like everyone else, like I was consistently told, like, especially with the Edmonton project and everything that came out shortly after I was diagnosed, I was like, oh, it's going to happen for me. Like, I won't have to live with this. And I was diagnosed about 11 years old. So, like, I remember my life before diabetes, and I was like, wasn't it nice when we didn't have to think about this? So I think being kind to yourself is just one of those things. Like, everyone is going to have bad days, but just like, it isn't something you asked for. It's not something you're failing at. So just like, be kind to yourself. And also in that, just like knowing that it's okay to be pissed off about it. Like, diabetes sucks. And so if you're mad that you have diabetes or you're having a bad day, like 100% valid. And there are a lot of people who probably feel the same way. And just like granting yourself the kindness to feel those things.
Thank you very much.
We've got 2 more questions here. So I'm going to go to Tassia and then Kyle, and maybe we'll just do like a quick rapid fire answer from the 3 of you, if that sounds good. And then we'll take a break and come back for our breakout rooms. So Tassia, go ahead.
Sorry, I had a quick question, so 2 questions, but like, how often are the site changes on your Omnipods and Tandems? Because mine might as well.
So on the Omnipod, that's actually another feature I like about it is it's for 3 days, but the Omnipod itself will actually stop working 8 hours after the exact 3-day to the hour mark. I don't know about anyone who has had a pump that's not the Omnipod, but I would push my sites way past the 3-day mark. You are really supposed to be changing them every 3 days, but I would push it past, and like your blood sugars can be out of whack. It can cause like issues with your skin, like with the insulin buildup underneath, that type of thing. So I've often described the Omnipod as being foolproof because it dies and you have to change it.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on that too. It's 3 days, 72 hours, or when your insulin runs out. It does at times fault sometimes due to like, static in your shirt or just, weather changes or something like that. But the beauty of also having Omnipod is I used to be on Animus. And a lot of those you would only put in your abdomen, where a lot of the time that's taken up by the DEX. So with Omnipod, you can actually put it on your arm, on your leg, on your back, and also in your abdomen as well. So you have that ability to change, so you're not getting used to one site and building up that insulin resistance to certain sites.
So like everyone said, the recommended is about 2 to 3 days for your site changes, just to avoid insulinomas, to make sure you're staying healthy and not growing weird bacteria cultures in your body. I will say the freedom of naked showers. So I wear both a continuous glucose monitor as well as the site for my insulin pump. And I really like the fact that, like, I can sometimes stretch the definition of 2 to 3 days to maybe like 4 or 5 days. Some people I know have to change it every day. They do recommend 2 to 3. And so like probably follow what is happening with as prescribed details.
Got it. Thank you.
So thank you guys. And Kyle.
Or for anyone who's like looking into pumps or just interested in pumps in general, I was with Omnipod for 5 years. Omnipod is nice because there's no tubing. You don't have to worry about like taking it off if you're doing sports or like if you're showering or whatever you're doing. It just like stays there, it does its thing. And it was really convenient when I was in hockey and just being a kid running around and being very physically active. So obviously consider your options, whoever's out there thinking about it.
Thanks, Kyle. I want to say a huge thank you to Heather and Kirsten for making time to join us today and sharing so much about your journeys and your insights and your, I don't know, just wisdom, because I feel like you're all so wise and have shared it so eloquently with everybody. So big thank you for joining us today and sharing so much. And I will turn it back over to Asma.
So as Heather mentioned, yes, thank you so much. We really do appreciate you coming and joining us today. It was honestly very, very insightful. Learned quite a lot despite being just like a supporter as well. Many tips and tricks.